We weren't supposed to be out there that long. 3 days, a loose plan, a stretch of high desert in Southern California that our friend Nate had scouted on a previous trip and said was remote enough for shooting practice without bothering anyone. 7 of us total, a mix of people who'd known each other for years, all adults, 3 of us with medical training. We brought good gear, enough food for 4 days, and enough common sense to know what the desert required of you in terms of water and heat management. The first day was what those trips are supposed to be. We set up camp near the road by a natural embankment, hiked a few miles in the afternoon, fired a few hundred rounds at homemade targets before the light dropped, cooked dinner under a sky that turned purple, then black, then unbelievably dense with stars. I remember feeling the particular satisfaction of being the right amount of tired in the right amount of emptiness. The one thing that didn't quite fit was the truck. It came down the road just as we were settling in for the evening. A heavy-duty pickup with a trailer behind it, moving slowly, too slowly, the way a vehicle moves when the people inside are looking at something. The trailer was covered with a tarpaulin, and the cargo underneath had no shape I recognized. Not camping gear, not equipment, not anything the typical desert visitor would haul. The truck bed itself was empty. The 2 men in the cab turned to look at us as they passed. I raised a hand, a friendly wave, the gesture you offer strangers in the wilderness as a kind of social contract. They looked at me with no expression whatsoever. Not a nod, not a wave, not even a blink of acknowledgement. After a moment, they both looked forward again, and the truck accelerated, the trailer rattling behind it into the dark. Weird, I thought. And then I let it go. The second day passed well. More hiking, more shooting, camp chores, afternoon naps in the shade. We stopped all firearm activity well before dark out of respect for anyone else in the area. Made a bonfire, opened some beers. That easy open-ended conversation that only happens outdoors started up. I was facing the southern hills when I saw the light. A dim reddish glow low on the hillside, there for perhaps 2 seconds before it dipped behind the ridge and vanished. I asked if anyone else had seen it. No one had. I told myself, ember, trick of the firelight, eyes playing games in the dark. I went back to the conversation. 10 minutes later, I saw it again. Higher this time, hanging in the sky above the ridgeline before arcing downward and burning out. Nate said, "That's a flare." We watched for another 5 minutes. A third one went up, slightly west of the second. The sight of 3 flares in sequence shifts something in your thinking. From that strange to someone is trying to be seen. 3 of us were EMTs. We had a full trauma kit. The math was simple. 4 of us went. Myself, 2 colleagues I'll call Avery and Elena, and Nate driving his truck. We told the others to stay with camp, loaded the medical gear, took our sidearms because we knew the cartels had historically used this corridor for transportation, and we weren't naive about that. Windows down, driving slow, calling out into the dark. Another flare went up to the west. We angled toward it, found a dry ravine that gave us a possible route, and drove down it with the headlights cutting maybe 30 feet of visibility ahead. We called out every few minutes. Nothing came back. The ravine ended in a natural bowl enclosed on 3 sides by rocky hills. We got out and swept the area with flashlights. The ground was undisturbed, no one. We were absolutely certain the last flare had originated right above us, but there was nothing to find and no one to find it. As we were making the U-turn to leave, the truck lurched. A sharp metallic hiss, rear passenger tire, flat. I got out to look and spent a long moment studying the damage before I said anything. The tear was a clean cut, not ragged the way a puncture from a rock or debris looks. A clean, straight incision along the sidewall, the kind a blade makes. I said it to the others. Avery said sharp rocks can do that sometimes. Eleanor looked at me and didn't say anything. I kept my flashlight moving and did not put my gun away, while Nate and Avery worked on the spare. The lug wrench bending, one nut stripped, the whole job taking far longer than it should. I stood watch at the edge of the light. The ravine walls rose around us, 20 feet of dark rock above the reach of our torches. I heard something fast in the darkness to my left and spun toward it, pistol up, light on. A rock, roughly the size of a cantaloupe, had rolled down the hillside and stopped about 8 feet from me. I scanned the ridge above. Nothing moving. Loose gravel still trickling down. I was about to lower the gun when the second rock came from the same exact spot. Same ridge section, same trajectory, separated by maybe 45 seconds. Rocks do not fall twice from the same location within a minute, unless something caused both of them to move. The hillside was not unstable. Everything else on it was completely still. I told the others. Nate said I was wound up from the flat tire. Avery laughed a little. I laughed too, because that is what you do when your nervous system is telling you something that your rational mind doesn't want to accept. We got the tire changed. A final flare went up as we climbed back into the truck, this time near the entrance of the ravine, almost directly behind us where we'd come in. We drove out. More flares to the northwest, improbably far from the others. The geometry didn't make sense for a single person or even a small group moving on foot. We drove toward the last light and found the campsite between two hills. I want to describe it carefully because the details matter. 2 tents, both still standing, both fully equipped with sleeping bags and personal gear inside. A fire pit with coals that was still faintly orange, extinguished within the last hour, maybe 2. Shoes outside the tent doors. Fully loaded packs leaning against a rock. Whoever had been here had left with nothing, in what appeared to be a significant hurry. I found the shell casings near the eastern edge of the site. 6 of them, 12 gauge, loose on the ground. I crouched and held my flashlight close. No dust on them. Clean brass. The smell of burnt powder was still present. These had been fired within hours. Eleanor was already heading toward the northern hill that overlooked the camp. She'd seen the glow before I had, orange and flickering, just above the ridgeline. I went with her. The sound reached us before the image did. A low collective vocalization, deep and resonant, somewhere between chanting and humming. The kind of sound that bypasses your ears and registers in your chest. We climbed the last 20 feet to the ridgeline and looked down. I have tried many times to describe what I saw in that valley, and I find that clean language fails it. Approximately 50 figures in dark robes, hooded, arranged in a wide circle on the valley floor, arms extended to the sides, perfectly level. All of them vocalizing in unison, that deep sustained chord of sound. In the center of the circle, a ring of fire 20 feet across, and inside the flames, rising from them, a black pyramid frame, perhaps 12 feet tall, burning at its edges. To the north of the gathering, parked with several other vehicles I didn't recognize, the truck and trailer from the day before. I said something. I don't remember what. Something like, "I think that's a cult." The words must have been louder than I intended, because as they left my mouth, the chanting stopped. All at once. A complete silence that was somehow louder than the sound that had preceded it. 50 hooded figures turned toward the ridgeline, toward us, in complete unison, in complete silence, in a way that no group of 50 people moves unless they have rehearsed it or been trained for it or are operating under something I have no framework to understand. I realized my flashlight was still on. Then they raised their arms above their heads and screamed. One voice first, a single high sustained wail, and then the others joined it, one by one, in a cascading wave until the valley was full of it. A sound that had no equivalent in anything I had ever heard. Not distress, not anger. Something older than those things. Something that my nervous system responded to on a level well below language. I grabbed Elena's arm. We ran. Down the hill, across the flat ground to the truck, gasping out an explanation while Nate had the engine running before we reached the doors. We drove, fast, back toward the main road, lights up full, nobody speaking. When we hit the main trail, the desert lit up. From every ridge and hill on both sides of the road, simultaneously, flares shot into the sky. Not one or two, dozens, filling the horizon left and right, ahead and behind, red light cascading down from every elevated point around us. We drove through a corridor of fire, and I understood then with complete clarity what the flares had been from the beginning. Not an emergency signal, a surveillance network, a perimeter, a system for tracking what moved through that desert, and perhaps for herding it in directions of someone else's choosing. The flares continued for several miles before fading behind us. We told the others when we got back to camp. They were skeptical in the way people are skeptical when a story is too strange to fit comfortably into their model of the world. But they knew we wouldn't invent something like this. And they knew the fear on our faces was real. We slept in a group with weapons accessible. In the morning, I was clearing the area around our shooting range when I found it. A pyramid frame, maybe 8 inches on a side, made from thin wooden dowels, burnt black, still faintly warm. Placed there sometime in the night while we slept. We left within the hour. I've thought about that campsite between the hills many times since. The tents still standing, the gear still packed, the shoes by the door. People who left in a hurry with nothing. People who had been there that same night, firing a shotgun in the dark, and then were gone. I hope they got out. I don't know who those 50 people were or what they were doing in that valley. I don't know if the flares were a warning or an invitation or a demonstration. I don't know how they knew where we were camping or when we'd arrive, or how they placed that small burned pyramid in our clearing without any of 7 alert adults hearing a sound. What I know is that some places in the world are used for purposes that the rest of us are not meant to see, and that the desert, flat and empty as it looks, hides things with a patience and a thoroughness that should give anyone reason to pause. Drive slowly through empty country at night. Pay attention to what doesn't wave back.